Lab 2025, democracy focus really under the theme democratic institutions must deliver again, exploring a new link between democracy and social justice. On the other side, I will get to introduce my guests, but of course, you also get to be part of the conversations at +267 395 6962.
Power to engage your world is on 96.0 FM.
So we agreed on a price for this in-drive ride up front.
Yep.
So it's locked in. It doesn't change.
It stays the same.
Even if it starts raining.
Stays the same.
Even if I eat this curried baloney kota.
Would you give me a chip?
Yeah.
Stays the same.
Tebogo First. Your price, your ride with 25% off until the end of November. Download InDrive today and ride at your price. The InDrive online passenger transport aggregator is not a taxi service. More info at indrive.com.
Are you stuck on what to cook tonight? Well, What's for Dinner Botswana has you covered. With Knorr, Robertson's, Jikelele, and Aromat, you'll discover tasty, quick, and easy meal ideas the whole family will love. From savory stews to mouth-watering stir-fries, we've got all the ingredients to make your dinner unforgettable. No matter what you're in the mood for, these trusted brands bring the flavor to your table every time. So, what's for dinner, Botswana?
Welcome to Democracy Focus, brought to you by FES Democracy Hub and Afro Barometer in collaboration with Gabs FM, redesigning democratic institutions together.
All right, let's get straight into it. 7:49 is your time. I gotta say, across the continent, citizens are asking, what is democracy delivering for me? From unemployment to corruption to service failure, the democratic promise seems to be under pressure. And today marks the birth of a brand new platform, the Democracy Focus 2025, bringing together policymakers, civil society, and democracy defenders to explore how we can make democracy deliver again. Joining us are the two voices shaping that conversation. Let me take this time to welcome Dr. McDonald Lewanika from Accountability Lab in Zimbabwe. Very good morning to you, Doc. Welcome to Gabs FM.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
All right, fantastic. And of course, he's not alone. He's with Sonia Gaebolae. When are you getting your doc cap, Sonia?
Such a tough question in the morning, Rowdy. Good morning to you and the Gabs FM viewers.
Sonia from Botswana Center for Public Integrity. I want us to start with the big question. When we say democracy must deliver again, what exactly are we saying democracy, democracy has stopped delivering? Let me start with you, Doc.
Yeah, so when we talk about democracy delivering, I think that we would have started the conversation at a fairly high level, because usually when people think about democracy and what it entails, people just think about elections. But I think that this conversation graduates the conversations beyond that concept of electoral democracy to substantive democracy. And when we say it must deliver, it also means that beyond just electing and changing those who govern or preside over our countries, it must deliver economic change or enhanced economic opportunities for its citizens. It must deliver social amenities and other elements of social recognition. It must be able to ensure that all citizens within a particular state or a particular country have equal access to social, economic, and political opportunities within that context. So when we talk about a failure to deliver, we are talking about failure spectrum of those three issues.
All right, fantastic. Let me bring in Sonia into the conversation. Why is it that despite, like what the doc is saying, holding elections, somehow citizens also still feel like there is a disconnect from governance and, of course, justice?
All right. Well, good morning once again. Usually the conversation of democracy delivering or satisfaction with democracy, I often talk about it in the sense that over and above the theoretical, the academic conversations around democracy and democratic theory, there is, to ordinary people, there is just the element of their lived realities, right? Their everyday life. So you'll find that in a lot of countries, especially in Africa, in terms of the material conditions of ordinary citizens, over the years, they have increasingly felt that those are declining. But also, I guess, juxtaposing this with what they were told or what they hear, democratic governance is supposed to deliver, which is in fact the opposite of what they see every day, right? And then to them, it seems that then this mechanism that is said to be the one that is aimed towards development and bettering of everyday life, to them then it feels like it has failed because they judge it with that metric.
Their own experiences.
Exactly.
All right, Dr. Lewanika, your work with Accountability Lab has really just focused on civic participation. What does accountability really mean in this particular context?
Well, accountability in this context means several things. But first and foremost, it entails that in order for us to be able to hold governments accountable in a democratic fashion, there must be trustworthiness of those that we elect. There must be transparency and access to information around what governments are doing. And that when we know what governments are doing, we should have the capacity and capability to ask them to account, question them, and hold them accountable at the end of the day. So at the center of this equation are two things. One is access to information, and then secondly, the centrality of the citizen. People have power. People are the ones who elect people and should have the right and responsibility to hold those that they elect accountable at the end of the day. And government officials should know that they are servants rather than people who are presiding in a place of ordination to citizens and must be answerable to.
That is very interesting. And Sonia, I'm going to be bringing you back into the conversation because access to information is a whole different conversation. And when we talk about democracy, but should it be? It's a hypothetical question. Are we as citizens demanding the wrong things from democracy? I like the fact that you do say that kind of when we're talking democracy, we're also just looking at our own experiences, our own, observations, to each their own, right? So are we demanding the wrong things from democracy? Are institutions failing to adapt?
Definitely the citizens are not demanding the wrong thing. Remember, at the core of democracy, it is this the social contract between the government and the people. And, there's often the saying that, democracy needs to be seen to be done just as much as it needs to be done. So in essence, it means even if a government is the most transparent or, the most well-meaning government, democratic government, the citizens need to also be of that opinion for the social contract to maintain its legitimacy, for the people to still feel that the government of the day is working for the greater interest or the greater good within society. So in terms of wanting or demanding accountability and transparency, it is in fact to the benefit of government to provide it than to the citizens to demand it. Because you strengthen the relationship, and the more legitimate a government is, essentially, you then have improved compliance with other issues. I think you'd remember a perfect example of this, of why I say, being transparent and accountable at a government level actually benefits the government in the long run. If you look at the issues around COVID a couple of years back, we found that a lot of countries that generally had been perceived, where governments had been perceived to be transparent and accountable, it was easier for them to get compliance to restrictions from their citizens, because at an ordinary citizen level, people thought and perceived that the measures being done were firstly applying to everybody, and secondly for the greater good of the rest of society. Whereas in governments where prior to COVID, there had been that problem of government not being accountable, not being transparent, they then struggled to contain the pandemic because they were struggling to get people to comply,
Yeah.
because they felt that certain rules apply to certain people. I think even in our own country, we had, those situations where people would defy protocols, established protocols at that time, out of the defense that they thought or they believed that there were higher echelons within society where those rules did not apply. Yes, so it's a give and take relationship, really. But when it comes to transparency and accountability, it can never be that there's a seeming I guess judgment that it's too much. It is in fact what democracy is.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I like the fact that we are painting a picture just to understand what exactly we are talking about here. It's just gone 7:58. When we talk about rebuilding trust, the key question becomes, how do institutions show transparency and accountability? Not just talk about it. That is coming up on the other side of the news. It's just gone 7:59. Let me once again thank our guests this morning, Dr. McDonald Lewanika, Accountability Lab Zimbabwe. He's not alone. He's with Sonia Gaebolae, Botswana Center for Public Integrity here in Botswana. And the theme really is democratic institutions must deliver again. We're exploring a new link between democracy and social justice. Would love for you to be part of this conversation. +267 395 6962. That's the number to text. That's the number to call. But we're also live on our Facebook page at Gabs FM.
We are online, Twitter and Instagram at Gabs_FM. Bringing the world closer to you. On air, online, on your mobile. This is Gabs FM News.
Top stories in the bulletin this hour. Minister calls for labor law enforcement. And in international news, Burkina Faso's military government arrests European NGO workers for spying. A very good morning to you with Gabs FM News at 8. I am Diana Mutu. Minister of Labour and Home Affairs Pius Mokhare has urged employers to ensure all workers have proper contracts and access to a labour law handbook so they know their rights. Speaking during the launch of regulations for the new Employment and Labour Regulations Law following Parliament's passing of the Employment Act Bill in July, Mokhare has stressed that no one should work without a formal agreement.
Programs that each and every organization should have a training program. 8 clear. Ha ele gore re na le expatriates mo go rona mo company ya rona. Go tshwanetse gore di sale morago molao wa rona wa gore ni wa go dira gore phateke understand. Understand. Molao wa go understand go na le contract kana ga mpio ko molao wa gore ha go na le understand le rile an expatriate. Motho yo understand ya motho le ena tshwanetse re a sign contract. Okay. Kompe go ga go diragale jang e re ga se tata go tsama ha ile gore wa tsama looking for greener pastures a kwa le gore ne ke understand ya re dimotelo ya no ke tsama ile go se ga go nne jang do tse ne re coverage mo molao di ne very very clear gore ya molao wa rona wa riana wa tsa khiro ga re ka dira jalo le gone le emphasize gore o paska simolla tiro a sena contract a itse gore o duela bokae o bereka nako mang after what time a itse melao ya pereko. All the organizations should have staff handbook molong a itse gore o tla o ga bereka go kae insurance le tsone di nne teng di duelwe batho ba golagalla mo ditirong ga ba tswa gore for insurance ga di ba cover mme ke lo tsele ka di lebellang gore le tla di tsenya ka tsela e ntseng yang in your regulations.
The minister also raised concerns over rising overtime costs, revealing that the ministry spent 55 million pula on overtime last year, with some employees earning nearly half their salary from extra hours. He warned that this points to staff shortages, threatens worker well-being, and puts strain on public finances. Mokhare reminded employers that overtime should only be used when absolutely necessary, as outlined in the Labour Act.
Hampi ko ara batho ba rona ba leiwa. Ba tsogela ka 7 ba batla go tšhoisa ka 10 bosigo. Go bordereng. Bo batla overtime. A me le nthale re ka re motho ka 8 o'clock kana ka 9 a ba santse a ka kgona go bona batho ba ba tsena ile high security area wa ba tsetsa ba lapile sa dirang o tempa he la ka ra sona tempa ya 10 minutes wo ta mo tsama a o bone rona tiri yana le yana a tsena wa go ra re nyaga mo a sa iti ministry wa rona ona gona mpe kwa the last financial year overtime we paid 55 million. Ile di overtime he kana go duela madi a kalo a overtime go supa gone gore o tlhoka batho age ya no go ga o tlhoka batho mme batho ba le teng o sa ba hire o bo duela go okeletsa yo a ntseng a le teng o mo duela ka overtime. You are actually doing a disservice to yourself. You are not being productive again, and you are only concentrating your resources onto only one person. That's like
The Botswana Congress Party, BCP, has rejected government's proposed acquisition of a controlling stake in diamond company DBS. The BCP says the move is highly risky, fiscally irresponsible and illegal. According to the party spokesperson, Dr. Mpopegu, government could spend over 46 billion pula to buy out shares from Anglo American at a time when the economy is in recession and budget deficits and public debt are rising. She argues that the diamond market is facing major uncertainty due to competition from lab-grown diamonds, falling demand and rising production costs. The party also criticizes the lack of parliamentary approval for the deal and questions the role of foreign financiers such as the Oman Social Wealth Fund. It warns that the acquisition could bankrupt the country or reduce Botswana to a front for foreign interests.
As Botswana Congress Party, we believe that these are lofty reasons as they do not provide a business case for the planned acquisition. We wish to highlight that our research indicates that the Botswana government will need 19 billion pula to acquire an extra 36% of the shareholding in DBS, or 46 billion pula to buy the entire 85% Anglo wants to offload. Having looked at variety of factors, the Botswana Congress Party wishes to state that this investment is speculative and risky, as the market trends do suggest that the natural diamond industry is facing high levels of risk and uncertainty. Further note that this is fiscal recklessness. Looking at the state of the economy and the country's fiscal position, we do not support this because the proposed transaction will have no immediate impact on economic growth, on government revenue, or employment creation. Also, caution against the opportunity cost of the acquisition. Currently, public health and public education are both at crisis state, and to acquire the quantum VS shares requires required for a controlling stake. Botswana will have to sacrifice the health and the lives of the citizens, as well as the education of our children.
Government has launched a review of the Children's Act of 2009, a key step towards strengthening child rights and protection. The announcement was made during the National Dialogue on Corporal Punishment and Child Protection, which brought together government leaders, Dikhosi, faith-based groups, civil society, and children. Gabs FM reporter Penyo Babusi with more.
The review aims to align national laws with global standards and amplify children's voices in shaping their future. According to UNICEF's Dr. Kimanzi Mutengi, the review reflects Botswana's commitment to child protection. Furthermore, Minister Nono Kafela Mokoko stressed raising children grounded in Boto, while Permanent Secretary Mamiki Kamanakao called the reform a commitment to raising children in safety, dignity, and love. Reporting for Gabs FM News, I am Penyo Babusi.
Now taking a look into our crime report, the Botswana Police Service BPS has arrested 110 people in a nationwide operation targeting the illegal drug trade. According to the police, the crackdown aims to dismantle drug distribution networks and hold key players accountable. Of those arrested, 72 were linked to Dagga, 9 to methamphetamine, and 1 to cocaine. Police have urged the public to continue cooperating in efforts to combat drug syndicates across the country. And lastly, in international news, Burkina Faso's military government says it has arrested 8 people working for a humanitarian organization, accusing them of spying and treason allegations that the Dutch non-profit categorically rejected. Burkina Faso Security Minister Mahamadou Sana said that the 8 people arrested worked for the international NGO Safety Organization, a Netherlands-based group specializing in humanitarian safety. Sana alleges the staff members had continued working for the organization after it was banned for 3 months for allegedly collecting sensitive data without authorization. Gabs FM News, bringing the world closer to you.
Gabs FM weather.
Today, weather conditions are expected to be partly cloudy and hot with isolated thunder showers in Silibepigwe and the surrounding areas, while partly cloudy and hot in Gaentse, Gaborone, Francistown and the surrounding areas. Weather conditions in Maun, Kasane and the surrounding areas are expected to be partly cloudy and very hot, while fair and hot in Tsabong and the surrounding areas. Temperatures are expected to go as high as 37 degrees Celsius in Maun, 38 in Kasane, 34 in Francistown and Gaentse, 33 in Silibepigwe, Gaborone and Tsabong, and 34 degrees Celsius in Gaentse. You're up to date with Gabs FM News.
Mabuitsane. Power to engage your world is on 94.7 FM.
Price Busters is back at House and Home, and we'll beat any price with our massive deals. Like the Restonic Vegas Queen Base set, only $3,499. Save a massive $2,000. And save $800 on the 263-litre Hisense black glass finish water on tap bottom freezer fridge. Now just $5,999. Put House and Home's unbeatable prices to the test. Offers end 5 October. T's and C's apply.
Engage with us. WhatsApp us now on +267 395 6962. Gabs FM.
Right, welcome back. 8:10 is your time. This is the last hour of BHD. My name is Khane, and we continue our brand new high-level dialogue. This is a space that is going to be bringing together policymakers, civil society leaders, researchers, and democracy defenders from across Africa and beyond. We are seeking to explore why citizens feel increasingly disconnected from democracy and how institutions can rebuild trust by delivering on social justice and, of course, essential services. Our organizers or our partners, FES, this is a global social democratic foundation with over 50 years of work in Botswana, as well as Afrobarometer, Africa's leading public opinion research network on democracy and governance, as well as society. And joining us on our brand new first episode is Dr. McDonald from Accountability Lab in Zimbabwe. He's not alone. He's with Sonia Gaebolae from Botswana Center for Public Integrity right here in Botswana. Let's continue with the conversation. Like I said earlier on, you can also be part of this conversation at +267 395 6962. Now, we did, just, paint a picture of when we say democracy must deliver again, what exactly we mean by that. So I want us to, deepen the discussion and, of course, get to connect transparency and accountability to real outcomes. We're talking social justice, service delivery, and trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why are accountability mechanisms, we're talking oversight bodies, independent media, and civil society, so vital in ensuring democracy delivers social justice? Let me start with you, Doc. Doc?
Yeah, so yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, super. Yeah, no, the institutions that you have just listed are critical institutions to democracy, and part of how they're supposed to work, or part of how the system is supposed to work, is through a system of checks and balances. But unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation, especially on the continent, but increasingly invest, where institutions that are supposed to provide checks and balances no longer do so because they are either captured or complicit in the misgovernance that is taking place. So conceptually, that the judiciary, parliament, and the executive are supposed to be almost equal branches of government. And when the presidency or the executive misbehaves, you expect parliament to check them, or you expect the judiciary to check them. But increasingly, like I said, we are faced with a situation where courts are accused of being captured, sometimes in part because of appointing authorities and things that are given to them. I think in South Africa there was a big conversation around state capture where institutions could not be able to play their balancing role to the executive on account of capture in one respect or the other. If you go to Zimbabwe, the question of capture, especially of the judiciary, is a big and in Malawi, we had similar issues in 2019, where independence of these different arms actually led to more favorable democratic outcomes for the people of Malawi. After an election had been stolen, they were able to reverse that on account of an independent judiciary. So you cannot you cannot overemphasize the importance of independence of key institutions where democracy is concerned, and the ability, again, of people to be able to raise issues when they feel that an injustice is being done, whether in terms of representation electorally or indeed socio-economically. I think a lot of elections, I think we talked about it just before the news, a lot of issues, a lot of elections are actually decided on bread and butter issues. And what it usually means is that a government which is voted out of power would have failed to deliver on those issues, and people seek alternatives to do that. So all of these are important pathways to build democracy in the region.
All right. I'm going to throw you under the bus. I mean, based on, of course, your research and all of that. But the real question that we should be asking as society, as voters, is, are these institutions strong enough in our region? I did hear you, speaking to capture, and sometimes also the issue of underfunding also gets somewhere in the way. But from your own research, with the conversations that you've had, Doc, are these institutions strong enough in our region?
So the short answer to that question would be no. And then the question of whether they are strong enough is a function of a variety of factors. One factor is funding that you have placed on the table. So who actually funds these institutions, and what kinds of funding mechanisms could actually strengthen them? I think that part of the challenge that we're faced with is that a lot of these institutions that are important to democracy are funded centrally by central government, by the executive, making it very difficult for them to hold the executive in check, because essentially the executive is the paymaster. But that is only one element. The other reason why these institutions are weak is actually a function of two things. One is trust. If you look across the institutions, what is really surprising about Africa as a continent or this sub-region is that the institutions that we trust the most, the three top institutions that we trust the most, are religious leaders, traditional leaders, and what's the third one? But these are institutions that are important, but they also betray a failure in the institutions of government and in our leaders, such that we need to look we trust more people who trade in hope and faith and stuff, because these institutions have failed. So there's a fundamental trust issue in the region which needs to be dealt with, where the executive, parliament, independent commissions, the police and so on are concerned, in order for us to strengthen our democracy. Then the last element is integrity. How you do one thing is how you do everything. I think that if politicians, if institutions are not seen to be operating with integrity, if they are not providing equal access to justice, if they are not being transparent at particular points, people generally then lose trust and faith in them, weakening their ability to be able to act when we actually expect them to act. So those to me would be sort of like the big challenges where that is concerned.
When you talk about transparency, I think the conversation is when citizens can see where the money is going, then they they would say now they're starting to see they're starting to feel what democracy really just feels like. Which brings me to this question: how does transparency in budgeting and service delivery, of course, we can't forget that one, directly rebuild citizen trust?
Well, I'm assuming this
Yeah.
this is for me. Well, I'll keep going back to the issue of legitimacy, right? And if you are having this conversation in partnership with Afrobarometer, and if you look at Afrobarometer data over the years, they have in their survey, which is also administered here in Botswana and across multiple other African countries. If you look at the indicators of Afrobarometer from Afrobarometer data on transparency and accountability, you'll realize that it's a majority in every country that demand accountability. For example, if you look at in the Botswana context specifically, the last Afrobarometer survey was last year in July, and there's this question there where respondents are asked, do they think that accountability sometimes, for the sake of efficiency and saving time, do they think that governments should sometimes not have to account so that they can implement faster? Or do they think that citizens should have governments account, even if, and that statement is important, even if there's a lag in terms of the time it takes to implement certain policies? And in the Botswana context at that time, it was almost 78% of Botswana who preferred the latter option of saying we would prefer if government sticks to accounting, even if it comes with a longer time of implementation. A similar question was asked on whether the president should account in parliament regarding the use of public funds, or whether because the president is assumedly acting on behalf of all of us, he should have the leeway to do things without having to account. And again, the majority went the president should account route. So that is a very important element, because if you look at, if that is the expectation from citizens, and again, Afrobarometer data shows that across African countries, there's a decline in satisfaction with democracy. It means that what they are expecting, these majorities where they say, let the government come account, let the president go to parliament and account, they are not getting what they are demanding. Hence the feelings of disillusion and dissatisfaction with democracy. So institutions, oversight mechanisms need to actively be seen to be delivering on their mandates, because it legitimizes the entire democratic process, and that on its own now has a positive impact on other aspects of democratic governance. If you look at participation, that is an integral part of democracy. You need the citizens to participate in the daily upkeep of democracy of the country, but they can only participate to the effect that they believe there is a benefit in them doing something, saying something, right?
Let me ask you this. I know I asked Doc earlier on to just give a short answer to whether or not institutions are strong enough in our region, and you're bringing in obviously the examples of Botswana here, and we know that Botswana often ranks well. Not so bad, when you look at other international models that really just look into the governance here in Botswana. And on the other hand, citizens are increasingly vocal about corruption, about weak service delivery. But what does that say about transparency in practice in Botswana?
Well, that is the evidence of what academia, civil society have been saying for a while now, that I guess the foundational phases of Botswana's creation of accountability mechanisms is lacking. So as a result, it then led to gaps in implementation. So if you look at the frameworks, the legal frameworks, the policy frameworks of how our governance system is set up, you have gaping holes within the laws. that are meant to be towards encouraging transparency, encouraging accountability. I think a typical example would be just an in-your-face example would be our Declaration of Assets law.
Yeah.
That's one law where the deficiencies there are glaring, right? So it's because we have these laws that we often say, and institutions that were seemingly created for the sake of existence, not for the sake of delivering oversight.
Yeah. I want to bring in Dr. Lewanika back into the conversation, and let us speak to reforms or practices that you see as urgent for African democracies to become more citizen-centered, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think before I just quickly try to answer that question, I just want to double down on the point that my colleague is making. I think that part of the challenge is that when we use matrices to understand the state of democracy or even the state of development, sometimes we do and talk about these things at a level that doesn't make sense to ordinary citizens. I think in 1996, the UNDP produced this report. It was a human development report where they talked about, when countries talk about increases in GDP and levels of living, but which didn't make sense to ordinary people on the ground. It was a development that produced no employment, a development that was faceless, a development that lacked fundamental elements of development for the ordinary person on the ground. And I think when we talk about democracy now, I think we need to bring back that term. So where we started talking about democracy and what democratic theory speaks to, I think we need to bring it back to ordinary people and try to get an understanding of what it means to them. And inevitably to them, it means improvements in their well-being. It means access to economic opportunities. It means receiving social services that you have been raising. So one of the fundamental questions that we need to deal with, especially in this Gaborone Democracy Lab, is a redefinition or reconceptualization of what democracy means to ordinary people. But just to quickly answer your question around what needs to be done, what kinds of reforms need to take place, I think that the first thing is focusing on promoting and encouraging governments to build inclusive institutions as opposed to extractive ones. Across the continent, we see a lot of examples of institutions that are put in place to save a powerful elite, to save those who are governing, and totally ignoring the rest of the population. And I think if we are able to put in place institutions which allow for popular participation of citizens, which allow for equal access to different elements, it may be economic opportunities, it may be justice, it may be social amenities, I think would have started going on the right path. The other thing that we need to do is to focus on that issue of building trust. When it comes to accountability and transparency, you've got two elements. You've got something that is actually happening and taking place in the country, and then you've got perceptions of what the situation is like. And when you talk about Botswana doing well in terms of these matrices, I think one of the matrices that quickly comes to mind is the corruption perception index. So whether you are actually fighting corruption or there's a lot of rampant corruption on the ground, if people don't get the sense that this is the case, then you've got challenges, because ultimately that translates to trust and impacts the question of legitimacy that has already been placed on the table. So, again, not to belabor the point, but accountability should not just be there, but people must see that it is there in order for us to build confidence and trust in the frameworks that are there at the end of the day.
And I guess one of the questions that we should ask the citizen is, what does democracy mean to you as a citizen? You can engage with us at +267 395 6962. Our WhatsApp line is open. We're also live on our Facebook page at Gabs FM. It's just gone 8:27. This is a conversation conversation that we'll be having every single Wednesday. It's not just a talk shop. This is a platform where research meets policy and civic action. We'll be, talking about connection on the other side of 8:45. Let me take this time to once again thank my guests. We will be continuing with this conversation on the other side. Dr. McDonald from Accountability Lab Zimbabwe, as well as Ms. Sonia Gaebolae from Botswana Center for Public Integrity here in Botswana. And to you too as well, like I said, you can be part of the conversation. I did ask you this very simple but very hard question. What does democracy mean to you as a citizen? Send your comments to +267 395 6962. This conversation is in partnership with FES, a global social democratic foundation with over 50 years of work in Botswana, as well as Afrobarometer, Botswana's Africa's leading public opinion research network on democracy, governance, and social society.
Francistown. Power to engage your world is on 96.8 FM.
Guard against dry skin this winter with Vaseline. Clinically proven to moisturize deeply, it restores dry, flaky skin, leaving it soft, smooth, and healthy. So this winter, don't just moisturize. Heal with the deep care of Vaseline. Try our dry skin repair, Cocoa Glow, or Argan Oil today to feel the difference. Your journey to beautiful, healthy skin starts with Vaseline.
The best part of your day, all day. Camps FM. Bringing the world closer to you. On air, online, on your mobile. This is Camps FM News.
A very good morning to you with Gabs FM News headlines. I am Diana Mutsu. Minister calls for labor law enforcement. And in international news, Burkina Faso's military government arrests European NGO workers for spying. Catch full details and more at the top of the hour.
Gabs FM weather. Business is brought to you by Muscom Maizaka. Muscom, #1 because of you.
We now take a look at the business news update. Loss-making and debt-burdened Chloe Energy says it will need to raise more funds to keep operations running at its Lesedi Gas to Power project. The company, which has already received about 26 million pula in funding from its largest shareholder, ILC Investments, says continued support will be crucial. Chloe warned that failure to secure enough financing could delay its planned 10-megawatt power supply project for the Botswana Power Corporation. The Botswana and Australia listed firm recently reported a loss of $4.8 million, or about 67 million pula for the year ended June 2025. We now take a look at the latest market update from the Botswana Stock Exchange. The domestic companies index closed the previous day unchanged at 10612.68. While the foreign companies index gained 0.11 points to end the previous day at 2845.61 points. Market activity saw a total turnover of 122 pula 3 thebe, with a total of 153,269 securities exchanging hands. The top three traded counters were Stanchart, BTCL, and BBS. Meanwhile, on the EFT's board, New Gold gained 4 pula to end the previous day trading at 531 pula, while both the New Palladium and New Platinum remained unchanged at 154 pula and 219 pula 40 thebe respectively. Lastly, we take a look at how the pula is performing against major global currencies. One British pound is currently trading at 18 pula 86 thebe. The euro stands at 16 pula 37 thebe. The US dollar is going for 14 pula 9 thebe, while the Chinese yen is trading at 1 pula 97 thebe. 1 pula will get you 1 rand 22 cents. Lastly, we take a look at today's expected weather conditions. Sirapiko and the surrounding areas partly cloudy and hot with isolated thunder showers. Francistown and the surrounding areas partly cloudy and hot. Maun Kasane and the surrounding areas partly cloudy and very hot. Tsabong and the surrounding areas fair and hot. Today temperatures are expected to go as high as 37 degrees Celsius in Maun, 38 in Kasane, 34 degrees Celsius in Francistown and Renzi, and 33 degrees Celsius in Silbepigwe, Gaborone and Tsabong. Remember that you're always up to date with Gabs FM News.
Gabs FM Business was brought to you by Muscom Maizaka. Muscom, #1 because of you.
Stay in the game with Gabs FM Sports Update, proudly sponsored by Betway. Yet way more, no persons under the age of 21. Bet responsibly.
All right, good morning, BHD listener. And here with more sports news this morning, we begin in the world of combat sports, where Conor McGregor has accepted an 18-month ban for violating the UFC's anti-doping policy. Now, according to Combat Sports Anti-Doping, Irish fighter McGregor missed 3 attempted biological sample collections within a 12-month period in 2024. Now, UFC policy dictates that athletes must provide accurate whereabout information at all times so they can be contacted and submit a biological sample collection without warning. McGregor, who has not competed professionally since suffering a broken leg in his last fight against Dustin Poirier in July 2021, missed tests last year on the 13th of June, 19th of September, and the 20th of September. Now, Combat Sports Anti-Doping said it reduced McGregor's ban from 24 months to 18 months in acknowledgement of his cooperation with the investigation and injury circumstances. In football news, first out in Europe, Spanish champions Barcelona said that they now plan to return to their renovated Camp Nou home only once they get permission to have a temporary capacity of 45,000 supporters. The decision comes less than a week after Barca once again delayed the expected return to the iconic home stadium, which was initially slated for November last year, before being pushed back several times. Previously, the Catalan Giants were hoping to reopen their stadium once they obtained a license to host matches in front of 27,000 fans, something they had hoped to secure last month. The decision to wait until the temporary capacity is increased to 45,000 is almost certain to cause further delays to the reopening of one of Europe's great stadiums after a redevelopment that has suffered several setbacks. The club are estimated to be paying 1.5 billion euros for the Camp Nou rebuild, which has been beset by reconstruction chaos. Now, Barcelona were humiliatingly forced to play 2 matches at the 6,000 capacity Johan Cruyff training ground stadium in the first weeks of the season after failing to get the permit they needed for the camp. Now, finally, in African football news, at the ongoing World Cup qualifiers, while Morocco have already booked their ticket for the FIFA World Cup next year, in Group E, Tanzania and Zambia will hope to bow out of the qualifying campaign on a high, beginning with the clash at the Amani Stadium this evening. Kickoff is at 9 p.m. Both Tanzania and Zambia are unable to qualify for the showpiece, given their standing in Group E. The Tafia Stars are currently second in their group, 11 points behind Morocco, and Zambia, on the other hand, are fourth and have accumulated just 6 points from 6 matches played so far. Chipolopolo recorded a 2-0 loss against Morocco in the most recent qualifier, while Tanzania saw out a 1-0 loss to Niger and also a 1-1 draw with Congo in the most recent set of Group E obligations. The FIFA World Cup qualifiers are wrapping up in the next week, so do stay tuned to Gabs FM Power to engage your world for more of those results and previews. More sports news will follow from 2:30 on Iconic and on the late lunch show from the 4 p.m. news bulletin. Good morning.
Stay in the game with Gabs FM Sports Update, proudly sponsored by Betway. Yet way more, no persons under the age of 21. Bet responsibly.
Gabs FM is committed to reporting news that is accurate, broadcast comment that is fair, and adhere to the highest standards of journalism. If you think we're not living up to this code, you can forward your complaint to the program's manager at Private Bag, BO 319 Gaborone, or call us at 317-0905, or email info@gabsfm.co.bw. or to the Botswana Communications Regulatory Authority, BOCRA, at Private Bag 00495 Gaborone, or call 395 7755. Masunga. Power to engage your world is on 95.1 FM.
Welcome to Democracy Focus, brought to you by FES Democracy Hub and Afro Barometer in collaboration with GABS FM, redesigning democratic institutions together.
All right, welcome back. 8:37 is your time, and we are continuing our conversation. We've been unpacking, why accountability and transparency are the beating heart, if I may put it like that, of a healthy democracy. And I did ask you a question earlier on: what does democracy mean to you as a citizen? +267 395 6962. Now, before we conclude our conversation, let me just jump to our phone call this side. GABS FM, you're live. Good morning. Hi. GABS FM. Okay. You're gonna have to call us back again if you want to just answer that question or just jump into the conversation. GABS FM, you're live. Good morning. Hi. GABS FM. Okay. All right. Or alternatively, you can send us a WhatsApp text or WhatsApp audio. So yeah, folks, let's continue. Sonia, let's talk about the Democracy Lab, what it is and what makes it different from, of course, the usual dialogues that we have seen, because we're almost at the end of our conversation now. I want us to reiterate, the importance of having a dialogue like this one.
Well, I wish maybe somebody from oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Somebody from FES to perhaps I guess go into depth about the idea of the Democracy Lab. But from how I understand it, this is just it's one of the very necessary platforms that is needed, that would inform policy making. I think a lot of the time, and I say it's necessary and lacking, because a lot of the times, if you look at academia, if you look at civil society, which BCPI is part of, which FES is a part of, if you look at these two sectors, they often have very crucial, very valuable information that a lot of the times the ordinary person either does not have access to interact with, or perhaps the understanding to really get the important points out of it. If you look at, we're talking today about, the issue of Afrobarometer data and, the trends it's been showing and what proportion of Botswana say about wanting accountability. As accessible as you and I may think this data is, but there are people who their access to it is through this platform that is being provided through the Democracy Lab.
Yeah.
Even policy formulation. Of course, at a government level, government does have its own mechanisms for research, research institutions, statistic institutions, and the like. But there's always that above and beyond type of understanding that academia and civil society has that could be important towards policy formulation, especially because in the Botswana context, we often talk about the fact that there's this seeming removed nature to our policies, lacking the human touch aspect of it. So the platforms like Democracy Lab that is being provided here, I think more than anything, they are important for bridging that gap between everyday information and expert information, informing government in the policy side, and also informing the citizens at a more synthesized conversational level.
Yeah. Doc, let me also just bring you back into the conversation, of course, just to understand how initiatives like the Gaborone Democracy Lab can really just help connect, research, policy, and civic action, to strengthen democratic accountability across the continent.
Yeah, so I think that the Gaborone Democracy Lab is first and foremost an acknowledgement that that a conversation is needed, and that the conversation cannot be relegated to just one sector of society. So when you look at what will be happening in Gaborone at the end of this month, it's a coming together of different actors from activists, academics, democracy practitioners and defenders, and ordinary citizens to have a collective conversation around the crisis around democratization that we are faced with at this particular point in time. And you don't need to look very far in terms of where the challenges are coming from. But I think that you also don't need to look very far from the citizen to see where solutions might be found. I always tell colleagues that, you know, the highest office and ultimate responsibility in any democratic setup is the office of the citizen. So this is an attempt to bring the citizen in their varieties back to the center of the conversation, to reimagine and think about how to save democracy. Because ultimately, I think that there is a fundamental agreement that even though it might not be delivering at the scale at which we needed to deliver, the other alternatives are much more brutal. And Asha, you don't need to go very far. You go to Mali, you go to Burkina Faso, you go to pretty much the whole of the Sahel. People are living under very difficult circumstances, under military regimes. And there are some examples from our region where people are constantly struggle because of the absence of democratic setups. So it's an opportunity to reimagine the conversation, an opportunity to bring the conversation back to the citizen and think about how we can make it deliver for everyone at the end of the day.
All right. We do have some messages that have come through here. This one says, hi, my opinion is that Western democracy is just too foreign and imposed on us Africans. Has our indigenous democracy failed us in Kotla and Mipato? Even the sponsors of our favorite institutions of their own countries are dismally failing. Then how would they expect us to excel when they have failed themselves in their own product? Please, Africa should look inside for its own solutions. Okay, let's go here. Gabs FM, you're live. Good morning. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. You're live on radio.
I'm good. This is Mr. Malefe.
Mr. Malefe, you're live.
Kana democracy kana ge wizor na gumu adi yan hutadi puseki sangore mutufu tata kana is the rule by the people for the people.
Remalefe. I love where you're going, but would it can we speak English so that our guests also get to understand? Okay, we'll try to translate. Okay, fine. Go ahead.
So, the Bushos are na different styles of rule. And then we have democracy. Democracy it's us the people. For example, that's a social contract between us and yourself. So the next time more than honesty, integrity, and accountability. And there's that detachment between me and you and all politics. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Ramalefe. It was really just a comment, just speaking to the breaching of that social contract that happens during elections. People vote because you promised something, or you promised, reforms, and at the end of it, your tenure, you haven't, reformed anything, or you haven't engaged the citizenry. And I love what Dr. McDonald said earlier on, that it's about time we take the dialogue back to the citizenry office. I think that sounds absolutely amazing. But of course, like this is our way of really just bringing the conversations back to you as the citizenry. Every Wednesdays from 7:40, we're bringing you these conversations. Let's go here. Gabs FM, you're live. Good morning. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. You're live.
I'm phoning in for the democracy. I tried earlier, but I think I was cut off.
Yeah, go ahead. You're live on radio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So my comment is simply that lawmaking needs to be transparent and involve consultation with the public. And how do we hold the government to account for the laws that it makes? Because we only have elections every 5 years, and they can make awful laws which can actually destroy democracy, and then we have to call them to account 5 years down the line. And also, how do we know what the laws are? For example, your news just said that the employment law will be enforced. But how do we know, as citizens of Botswana, how do we actually know what the law is? There's no website that gives us access to the laws in real time. That's absolutely essential in a democracy. You can't talk of the rule of law if nobody knows what the law is. How do we actually access the law? You get a hard copy and it's out of date in a month or two. Nobody updates the laws. Nobody bothers to. The laws are terribly drafted. There's so many things, but I really think that one of the ways we can address transparency and accountability is to make the process of making laws transparent and inclusive, and we can make the laws that are made constantly available to the public. For example, there's a Miffy headline, 3rd of October, saying Boko grants wealthy shortcuts to citizenship.
Yeah.
That is just terrible.
Yeah.
So in other words, people from, we've been reduced to only having one citizenship in this country for all these years.
Yeah.
And now for $75,000, which is nothing to a wealthy individual, they can just buy their citizenship here. We haven't even seen any debate in Parliament about this. How do these things happen? Our vote as citizens will be totally diluted, and we could be basically disenfranchised by giving foreigners the vote in this country.
All right. Thank you so much.
So, and just the last thing about capture of institutions. I don't know if anybody's looked. I don't know why there's not more noise being made about it. This constitutional amendment bill, which is supposed to be introducing this magnificent constitutional court, is actually, in my opinion, no more than the capture of the judiciary by the presidency. It's, okay, so my real question is, how do we hold governments to account for the laws they make?
All right.
And then I also think I think the government should be encouraged, and in fact it should be mandatory, that they should spend some money and resources on getting a website with the laws that are up to date and kept up to date, so that every individual, at least in theory, has access to the law in real time.
All right.
So that the rule of law has some meaning. Sorry, I think that was pretty long, but
thank you so much. Thank you so much. Listen, this is your platform, really. Dr. McDonald, we've had such a loaded question. How do we make, how do we hold account the government, and especially that we are saying elections come after every 5 years? What about in between, when there's a lot that is happening? There's a lot of change that happens without my engagement as somebody that put these people to power. How do we go about it, Doc? And I guess as also just your parting words.
Okay, thanks a lot, and that indeed is a loaded question, but one which is central to the conversation. I think that when we started the conversation, I did say that the good thing about this conversation is that it elevates the discourse beyond electoral democracy to a more substantive form of democracy. When we are talking about a more substantive form of democracy, we are indeed talking about participation and engagement beyond elections or in between elections. And I also mentioned that it is the responsibility of the citizen to constantly and consistently check on how their employees are doing. You elect people during an election, you don't wait 5 years to get them to account. So we need to promote a culture of participation in between elections, and there's a wide variety of ways in which we can be able to do that. We talked about the importance of access to information, so the media has got a role in terms of just holding the state accountable in between elections. There are processes, parliamentary hearings, budget statements and all sorts of things that happen in between elections that we can be able to leverage as citizens to hold the state accountable. Our will is given or demonstrated during elections, but our will as citizens is also not frozen. It is constantly changing and can be adapted on account of what those that we have deployed to positions of authority are doing, and we need to consistently and constantly check on them. I also just want to quickly reflect on issue that was raised by our first caller. I think we need to differentiate between two things. You know, there isn't something that we can call Western democracy or African democracy or Botswana democracy. I think once we do that, we fall into the challenge of having democracy as anything and everything. At the end of the day, I think that there are guiding parameters around what a democratic setup looks like. People's rights are respected. There is a separation of power. There are checks and balances in terms of how those in authority operate. And I think that when those tenets are there, we can be able to talk about democracy. If we don't do that, then colleagues in Libya who are constantly fighting each other or in South Sudan can tell us that that is the Sudanese type of democracy. So we need to avoid the challenge of democracy with adjectives. Otherwise, it will become anything. Ultimately, it is aspirational, and it's almost a perfect state. And no country has reached it. I think you can look at the place where people think this concept emanates from in America, and you can see the state of their democracy is in total disarray at this particular point in time. So it's aspirational. It really is not geographically bound, and I think that is part of the reconceptualization of the question of democracy that we hope to be carrying out during the course of this month, leading up to the Gaborone Democracy Summit at the end of the month.
Fantastic. Now, and to you too, Sonia, also as your parting words, but I'm going to link it to our last comment here. Somebody saying, how do we have a social contract when there's no midterm review except after 5 years, with no option of no confidence on elected representatives? Then democracy is pie in the sky. Look at how we vote councillors but have no office to work from and elected MPs. How are under-resourced and unstaffed, or who are rather, this is just a dream. It would never be realized. It would be a chorus without an end until we have a good law to hold those vote accountable midterm. Let's not salary the MP, but be paid according to the approval of the constituency.
Rather drastic way, but I think the sentiments are clear, and I agree with the general sentiment.
Yeah.
I think there's this focus. Of course, it is rightly so that for a lot of the time, citizens, in terms of participation, they elevate voting amongst any other form of political participation, and that is true. But I think we tend to highlight that, leaving behind even the government side of it, right? So if you look at the mechanisms of holding government accountable, where elections is one of them, there is no other means that is as, I guess, advertised, funded, encouraged as voting time, election time. And that, I repeat, that is the right thing, right? You want people to go out and vote, and exercise that civic duty as much as possible. But in between, it's not only the citizens that are uninterested in exploring other ways of participation, but even on the other side as well, there's not a lot of emphasis on the other mechanisms of wanting accountability. If you look at the process around our lawmaking, the allowances for public consultation and public appreciation of bills and laws when they're still in their foundational phases. A lot of people don't know what mechanisms are in the Botswana context, what mechanisms allow for that in terms of the creation of various type of laws, what the public is and at what point, what should the public have access to before, certain discussions are had in Parliament. And as a result, we don't interact with those. But even for those of us that may have some insights into what provisions there are, you find that they are made in such a way that they are not as supportive or as encouraging
Yeah.
of the very idea of why they're there, which is for ownership of these laws. Again, I link the legitimacy and the compliance aspect. If you are going to create laws that people don't resonate with, you are going to have a problem to have them comply, abide by those laws. So you need ownership, a sense of feeling of ownership on the citizen side of the institutions, of the laws and the other mechanisms around the governance landscape, for them to actually respect what they are there for. They need to feel that they own them.
Yeah.
Yes. So the information aspect of things when it comes to political participation as well, I think it's an important aspect. But in general, the sentiment there needs to be participation beyond just waiting to cast your vote every 5 years.
Every 5 years. Yes. Thank you so much, folks. Such an incredible episode 1 of this fantastic feature that's starting today, 7:40 every Wednesdays. Let me take this time to thank my guest, Dr. McDonald Lewanika, as well as Miss Sonia Gaebolae, and of course to our partners FES and Afrobarometer for championing this dialogue. Democracy must deliver again, and it starts with accountability. What works for the citizens? Let's do this again next week, Wednesdays. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Cool stuff. It's just gone 8:58 and I'm out of here. I'm back again tomorrow between 6 and 9 o'clock. Otherwise, Mid-Morning Delight comes your way on the other side of the news from 9 to 12 o'clock. They are broadcasting live from Global Expo Botswana, kickstarting today, the 8th of October until the 11th of October 2025, followed by the Big Man. A Big Man is a Big Man, iconic, with Dolomec from 12 o'clock until 3 o'clock. It's just gone 8:58. Good morning.
For Africa to thrive, democratic institutions must deliver again. Thank you for tuning in to Democratic Focus, redesigning democratic institutions together, brought to you